On March 12th, from a military hangar in Yellowknife, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a landmark $40 billion plan to defend Canada's Arctic, but the actual cash commitment from government coffers is closer to $87 billion. That is a quiet gap of nearly $50 billion. Think of it like this. It's the difference between a home's advertised price and the total cash you actually pay on the mortgage. This isn't an accounting error, it's a strategic signal. So, the real question is not about the math. It's about what this enormous cash flow is truly buying and what its existence reveals about the silent battle for sovereignty on our northern frontier. So, where does that nearly $50 billion difference from the hook come from? It's not a secret, but it requires looking past the headlines. The answer lies in the fundamental difference between two ways of seeing money, the government's books and the actual cash leaving the bank. First, the official figure. The government, like most large organizations, operates on what's called an accrual basis. Think of it as recognizing the cost of an asset over its entire lifespan, smoothing it out for bookkeeping. This is where the public-facing $38.6 billion figure comes from. The Department of National Defense's own fact sheets confirm this is the cost on an accrual basis spread over 20 years. But the strategic reality of securing a frontier isn't about bookkeeping, it's about cash flow. This is the actual money being allocated from our national reserves to be spent on steel, concrete, technology, and people. And that figure, the true scale of the financial commitment, is close to $87 billion. That is the real number. This accounting difference is rarely discussed in major headlines. Before this video, were you aware of the true cash scale of this commitment? Let us know with a yes or no in the comments. It helps to map the public awareness of these strategic files, and this is precisely where an accounting detail becomes a strategic revelation. A cash commitment of this magnitude is not a routine upgrade. It is a fundamental, historic pivot. The evidence for this is simple and undeniable. This makes it the largest single investment related to NORAD in nearly 40 years. You do not commit that level of capital simply to polish the existing machinery. Instead, you do it to build an entirely new strategic posture. This funding isn't just for a wall of new radar stations, it's a comprehensive military and civil infrastructure plan designed to create a self-sufficient northern ecosystem. It's a clear move toward strategic independence in the Arctic. So, if the price tag is $87 billion and the purpose is strategic independence, what does that fortress actually look like on the ground? What specifically are we buying? We are about to move from the balance sheet to the blueprint. In the next part, I will break down the physical layers of this new northern shield, piece by piece. This is the blueprint. This is where the abstract $87 billion becomes steel, concrete, and fiber optic cable buried deep in the permafrost. The core of this physical transformation is a $32 billion investment announced by Prime Minister Mark Carney's office, dedicated to fundamentally rebuilding 4 forward operating locations, or FOLs. These are not minor renovations. The runways and hangars we inherited from the Cold War were never designed to support a modern stealth aircraft like the F-35. They were relics of a different era, facing a different threat. What is being built now is a permanent high-readiness strategic presence across our northern frontier. Let's break down the 4 pillars of this new fortress. First, we look west to Inuvik. Its strategic role is to be the forward edge, the primary launch pad for our most advanced and heavy aircraft. The work here is extensive. The runway is being completely rebuilt and lengthened. New hangars are being constructed, specifically designed for the sensitive systems of stealth platforms. Most critically, its fuel storage capacity is being tripled. That number is not arbitrary. It directly translates to sustained, independent operations, giving our Air Force the endurance to patrol vast Arctic territories without a constant lifeline to the south. Next, we move to Yellowknife, which is being remade into the central command and logistics hub of this northern network. Beyond a simple runway extension, it is receiving new climate-controlled maintenance hangars. This is a game changer. It means our most sophisticated jets can be repaired and serviced on site in extreme cold, rather than being flown thousands of kilometers south. Paired with modern munitions depots, Yellowknife becomes the operational nerve center, able to sustain high-tempo combat operations independently. Third, and perhaps the most powerful symbol of this shift, is Iqaluit. The infrastructure here is being redesigned for one specific purpose: to permanently host a fighter squadron. This involves a level of engineering few places on Earth require. Unique heating systems to function at extreme low temperatures and fully redundant power grids. This transforms Iqaluit from a seasonal stopover to a year-round garrison. It sends an unambiguous signal that our sovereignty in the Eastern Arctic is no longer a part-time commitment. Finally, we turn east to Goose Bay in Labrador. Its role is transatlantic. It is our strategic link to NATO and the North Atlantic. To serve this function, its hangar capacity is being doubled and its training ranges are being massively expanded. This positions Goose Bay as a key staging point for Allied operations, ensuring Canada is not just a beneficiary of the NATO alliance, but a critical contributor to its northern flank security. So, the physical fortress is being forged. A chain of hardened, self-sufficient nodes stretching across the top of the world. But a fortress, no matter how strong, is useless if it is blind. These multi-billion-dollar air bases can't project power if they don't know what is coming over the horizon. And that is where the second, equally critical layer of this strategy comes into play: the shield. The advanced surveillance system designed to give this fortress its eyes. So, what exactly is this shield? And more importantly, what new dangers is it designed to see? Our legacy radar systems, the backbone of NORAD for decades, were built for a different era. They were designed to track Cold War bombers, predictable, relatively slow targets. Today, they are functionally blind to the new physics of warfare. Imagine trying to hit a curveball thrown at 5,000 miles per hour, a ball that can change direction mid-flight without warning. That is the precise problem our defenses face with modern hypersonic and advanced cruise missiles. They are not just faster. Their erratic flight paths make them fundamentally unpredictable for old technology. This is why the centerpiece of Canada's new strategy is a completely different kind of nervous system, the Arctic Over-the-Horizon Radar Network, or A-OTHR. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a categorical leap in capability. Unlike traditional radar, which is limited by the curve of the Earth, A-OTHR bounces its signals off the ionosphere to create a tripwire that can see thousands of kilometers beyond the horizon. What this truly accomplishes is buying back time. It restores the precious minutes of decision-making that these new weapons were designed to erase. This is not a theoretical project. It is a $6 billion, 20-year collaboration with Australia, built on their proven Jorn technology with an initial operating capability expected around 2029. But to think of this as just radar is to miss the full picture. This is the core of a multi-domain sensor network. These are the eyes of the system. In addition to the ground-based A-OTHR, this network includes a new constellation of surveillance satellites, providing a view from above and a web of undersea acoustic sensors listening for threats moving silently through our Arctic waterways. Of course, seeing a threat is only the first step. All that data from space to the seabed flows into the brain of the system, integrated command and control centers that fuse this information into a single, coherent, operational picture. And this finally brings us to the fist. Once a threat is detected by the eyes and analyzed by the brain, Canada is investing another $6.4 billion in the advanced interceptors required to eliminate it. This includes short-range AEM and 9X missiles, medium-range AMRAAMs, and future long-range interceptors, creating a complete, logical defense architecture from detection to destruction. So there it is, the eyes, the brain, and the fist. An intricate, multi-billion-dollar technological shield designed to counter 21st century threats. But this raises the most critical question of all. This technology, this $87 billion strategic overhaul, it is not being deployed in a vacuum. It is a direct reaction, a calculated counter move on a global chessboard. So the real question isn't, how does it work? The real question is, why now? And why at this unprecedented scale? What specific moves from Russia and China in the high north have forced Canada's hand so dramatically? The answer to why now is that the Canadian Arctic has ceased to be a remote, frozen frontier. It has become the central stage for a new great game, and the pieces have been moving for years. To understand this $87 billion response, you must first understand the calculated moves of the other players. First, there is Russia. This is not a hypothetical threat. It is a systematic physical expansion. Since 2014, Moscow has reopened and extensively upgraded numerous Soviet-era military bases across its northern flank, like the Nagarskoye Air Base. The Air University reported in March of this year that Russia now maintains a fleet of over 40 icebreakers. That is not a typo, over 40. It's a fleet that projects power and guarantees access across an entire ocean, year-round. This is the quiet establishment of facts on the ground, or rather, on the ice. Then there is China. Beijing strategically defines itself as a near-Arctic state, a term that reveals a clear long-term ambition. This ambition has a name, the Polar Silk Road. As an October 2025 brief from the Institute for Security and Development Policy outlines, this isn't just a concept. It's being advanced with scientific missions and naval deployments, including planned joint activities with Russia near Alaskan waters. The strategic implication is undeniable. The vast expanse we long considered empty is rapidly filling with competitors. This intense interest is driven by an immense economic prize. The Arctic holds some of the world's last great untapped reserves of oil, natural gas, and critical rare earth minerals, but the ultimate prize may be the water itself. The increasingly navigable Northwest Passage is a future Suez Canal but made of ice, a functional shortcut between Asia and Europe that would fundamentally reshape global shipping routes, shaving thousands of miles and weeks of time off voyages. Controlling access to such a route is a generational strategic asset. All of this leads to the final, and perhaps most critical, driver for Canada, strategic autonomy. For decades, we have operated under the implicit security umbrella of the United States. But in an era of political unpredictability, relying on a neighbor to defend our own sovereign interests is a profound vulnerability. As Mark Carney articulated with stark clarity, we will no longer rely on others to defend our Arctic security or to fuel our economy. We're taking full responsibility for defending our sovereignty. This $87 billion plan, creating an estimated 12,000 jobs in its construction phase, is the financial manifestation of that principle. So with the global chessboard set and the stakes clearly defined, Canada's grand strategic response is in motion. But a strategy of this scale is only as strong as its most critical components. And right now, one of the most vital pieces of that hardware, the actual fighter jets that will patrol this new frontier, is itself at the center of a fierce and complex debate back in Ottawa. This brings the entire plan from the high Arctic right back to Parliament Hill. That debate centers on a single critical question. What is the right tool for this new frontier? And for Canada's future in the Arctic, this is not a settled matter. On paper, the plan was clear. In 2023, Canada committed to buying 88 F-35A fighters. But in March of 2025, Prime Minister Carney's government placed that entire purchase under a politically charged review. This has thrown the operational core of our Arctic strategy into a state of profound uncertainty. Into this void steps a compelling alternative. Sweden's Saab, which has offered not just to sell us their Gripen fighter, but to build it in Canada. The company's CEO, Mikkel Johansen, recently stated that a 5-year delivery timeline is absolutely credible, leveraging our existing aerospace ecosystem, a stark contrast to notoriously lengthy international procurement cycles. This is not a theoretical exercise for the distant future. This is a live negotiation. In April of 2026, Saab confirmed intensive negotiations are underway with Ottawa. This news landed at the same time a high-ranking NORAD commander made a startling admission. The F-35, he said, is not critical for North American continental defense. That single comment provides immense political cover for a strategic pivot. So the choice is becoming stark. The path of the F-35 is one of seamless integration. It ensures our forces operate in lockstep with our American allies. A plug-and-play approach. The price for that convenience is deeper dependency and a loss of sovereign flexibility. The path of the Gripen represents a bid for industrial sovereignty. It promises an aircraft built on our soil, tailored for our harsh conditions with lower operating costs. The trade-off is that we move slightly out of perfect alignment with the American military machine, forcing us to define our own path. This decision will define our nation's capacity for military self-reliance for the next 40 years. But here is the truly unsettling question. What if this entire debate, F-35 versus Gripen, integration versus independence, is a distraction? What if the choice of hardware is irrelevant because the entire $87 billion strategy is being quietly undermined by a fatal historical flaw baked into Canada's own system? A flaw that has crippled our biggest ambitions before and is threatening to do so again. That fatal historical flaw is a ghost that haunts every major Canadian project. It's our own decades-long documented inability to execute. It's the Achilles heel of Canadian ambition, our system of procurement. Let's be clear. The greatest threat to this $87 billion Arctic strategy may not come from a Russian submarine or a Chinese satellite. The threat is from within. Multiple analyses cited in outlets from the Toronto Sun to the Hill describe Canadian defense procurement as being chronically fraught with scandal and cost overruns. It's a recurring story, ambitious announcements, followed by bureaucratic gridlock, endless delays, and budgets that balloon into national embarrassments. This isn't opinion, it's a documented pathology of our state apparatus. Now, take that systemic weakness and transport it to the most unforgiving environment on Earth. A December 2025 Atlantic Council report stated the challenge bluntly. Building and maintaining Arctic infrastructure is already prohibitively high. The reason is what strategists call the tyranny of distance, the immense logistical nightmare of operating in a region with extreme weather and almost no existing support. Every piece of equipment, every hour of labor carries an exponential cost multiplier that makes southern projects look simple. This is where the strategic danger crystallizes. When you combine a procurement system known for delays with an environment that punishes every delay with massive costs, you create the perfect conditions for a capability gap. This is the critical scenario where the money is spent, or more likely overspent, but the promised defensive strength never materializes on time. The radar network is incomplete, the runways aren't operational, the drones aren't flying. The plan exists on paper, but on the frozen ground where it matters, our sovereignty remains a bluff. So the ultimate question isn't just whether the plan is bold enough, it's whether our own system is capable of delivering it. But let's engage in a different thought experiment. What if we defy history? What if the plan works flawlessly? The radars go up, the bases are built, and Canada gains unprecedented control over its northern territory. This presents an even more complex and perhaps more dangerous strategic problem. Because what happens when Canada's newfound sovereignty directly challenges the strategic interests of our closest and most powerful ally? What happens is a quiet, decades-long legal disagreement transforms into a very public, very real sovereignty challenge. Let's connect the dots on this strategic map. First, the physical reality. The Arctic ice is receding. The Northwest Passage, for centuries a frozen dream of explorers, is becoming a navigable, commercially viable shipping lane. This isn't a future projection, it's a present-day logistical fact that fundamentally alters the calculus of the North. Second, the legal fault line that runs right through it. For over half a century, Canada has claimed the passage as our internal waters, subject to our full sovereign control. Think of it this way. Ottawa views this waterway as our sovereign equivalent of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Washington, just as consistently, has rejected this claim. Citing sources from Policy Magazine and OpenCanada.org, the U.S. officially views the passage as an international strait, open to all ships, their equivalent of the Strait of Gibraltar. They have previously labeled Canada's claim as illegitimate. For decades, this was a manageable disagreement, a file for diplomats to discuss precisely because the ice made it an academic point. That is no longer the case. Now, enter the $87 billion investment, the new sensor networks, the advanced patrol aircraft, the forward operating locations. These are not just for deterring rivals from afar. They are the instruments Canada will finally have to enforce its claim. They provide the capacity to monitor, to communicate with, and to potentially regulate every vessel entering what we define as our national territory. This creates the alliance paradox. Let's trace the inevitable sequence. A U.S.-flagged commercial vessel, or perhaps even a Coast Guard icebreaker, decides to transit the passage without requesting Canadian permission. A Canadian patrol aircraft detects the vessel. It hails them on the radio, informing them they are in Canadian internal waters and must report to our authorities for passage. The American captain politely declines, citing international law and freedom of navigation. In that moment, a diplomatic file becomes a real-time operational crisis. Does a newly empowered Canada simply wave it through, rendering the entire sovereignty aspect of this investment meaningless? Or does it enforce its rules, risking a direct confrontation with its most critical defense and economic partner? This is precisely what strategic analysts mean when they call the unresolved status a strategic vulnerability. The very actions we take to increase our autonomy could trigger a direct challenge to it from the one country we can least afford to alienate. Sovereignty, it turns out, is not just about building fences against adversaries. It's about navigating the complex property lines you share with your friends. So, we have tracked this $87 billion plan from the concrete of its new foundations through the systemic risks of our own procurement process, and now to this hidden paradox of alliance management. This brings us to the final pivotal question of our entire analysis. When we weigh the geopolitical threats, the immense financial cost, the internal risks, and these complex diplomatic trade-offs, is this historic investment truly charting a course for a more secure and sovereign Canada? Or is it a strategic gamble we simply cannot afford to lose? That is the essential question posed at the end of our last segment. Is this an $87 billion gamble? The strategic reality is clear. Inaction is the only guaranteed loss. Standing still while the geopolitical map of the North is redrawn is not a viable policy. It's a quiet surrender. Therefore, we must see this project for what it truly is. Not simply a line item on a defense budget, but Canada's single largest, most concentrated effort to secure its sovereignty and control its own destiny in the 21st century's most critical new arena. As one analyst aptly stated, the Arctic is no longer a distant frontier, but a central stage for geopolitical competition, technological advancement, and economic opportunity. Control of that stage is the prize. The plan is in motion, the money is being spent, the concrete is being poured from the deepwater port at Inuvik to the NORAD modernization sites across the tundra. Yet, as we've seen, this is a complex machine with many moving parts, external pressures from both rivals and allies, and the persistent friction of our own internal systems. After everything we have analyzed, the real question remains: who will actually end up controlling the future of the North? That question will be answered not by plans, but by execution and vigilance in the years to come. If this kind of deep dive into the real numbers and hidden strategies is what you're looking for, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, because the next great power shift is already unfolding.